For 7 years, the real story of Ryuichi Kihara and Riku Miura remained largely untold. It wasn't the fairy tale many people imagined. It was a story built on sacrifice, resilience, and quiet determination. Everything began in the summer of 2019 at a rink near Toronto, Canada. A 26-year-old skater and a 17-year-old teenager stepped onto the ice together for the first time. They knew each other's names. They respected each other's skating ability. But beyond that, they were complete strangers. No one can truly describe what they felt that first day. Years later, Ryuichi Kihara would say it felt like being struck by lightning. Riku Miura simply said she was glad she had reached out to him. Their words were different, but they were describing the same life-changing moment. That was the beginning. 7 years later, in February 2026, they stood on top of the podium at the Milano Cortina Winter Olympics. They captured Olympic gold, broke the world record, and moved an entire nation to tears. But millions of people watching on television never saw what happened behind the scenes. The road to that Olympic title was never a perfect, inspirational movie. It was far more ordinary, far more painful, and far more human than anyone realized. To understand their journey, you first have to understand where Ryuichi Kihara was before everything changed. Back in 2019, his competitive career seemed to be reaching its final chapter. His previous partnership had ended, he was recovering from a serious back injury, and he was living alone in a small apartment in Toronto. To cover everyday expenses, he worked part-time while continuing to train. Imagine that for a moment. A professional figure skater, living overseas, working side jobs just to survive. He constantly struggled between chasing an impossible dream and accepting reality. If someone had told him then that he would become an Olympic champion only a few years later, he probably would have laughed. At that point, believing such a future was almost impossible. Then everything changed with one phone call. A young skater named Riku Miura asked him if he would become her pair's partner. Kahara didn't hesitate. Later, he admitted that without Riku, he would have retired long before reaching the Olympics. That single decision completely changed the direction of his life. But at the time, no one knew what their partnership would become. They were simply two people trying to build trust while standing on a sheet of cold ice. Their first few years together in Canada were anything but glamorous. Because Riku was still a minor, she lived with a Canadian host family. Every morning, Kahara drove to pick her up, took her to practice, and drove her home afterward. Day after day, year after year, Riku couldn't drive, so Kahara became the one behind the wheel. Even on mornings when his injured back hurt so badly that sitting in the driver's seat was painful, even on days when he needed pain medication before practice, he still showed up. Not because anyone expected him to, not because it was written in a contract. He simply believed it was the right thing to do. Near their training rink in Toronto was a Japanese massage therapist's clinic. Kahara regularly visited the clinic by himself. Riku rarely joined him. While she spent time in the waiting room enjoying Mario Kart on her Nintendo Switch, Kahara was inside discussing injuries, recovery, and the condition of his body. At that age, Riku didn't yet understand how important physical maintenance was. Kahara had learned that lesson years earlier. That difference between them quietly revealed the structure of their partnership long before anyone noticed it. Kahara prepared, Riku performed, Kahara organized. Riku followed her instincts. No coach assigned those roles. No one created that system. It happened naturally because of who they were as individuals. Coach Bruno Marcotte once described them with a simple comparison. Ryuichi was Luigi, Riku was Mario. It wasn't about who was better, it was about personality. Kahara was cautious, thoughtful, and always focused on taking care of others before himself. Riku was energetic, instinctive, and rarely overthought anything. They were complete opposites. Ironically, those differences became the very reason their partnership lasted for 7 remarkable years. Kahara's calm logic gave stability to Riku's emotions. Riku's warmth brought life to Kahara's disciplined mindset. Neither one could have achieved the same success alone. No single word could fully describe what they had become. The words teammate and family, when placed side by side, explained far more than the label partners ever could. A teammate is someone who fights beside you through every challenge. Family is someone whose presence becomes permanent, whether you choose it or not. Ryuichi Kihara and Riku Miura chose to meet. They chose to compete together. And over time, they became people who simply belonged in each other's lives. That transformation took 7 years. Looking back, That may have been the true foundation of their Olympic gold in Milan. The 26-year-old man who stepped onto the ice in Toronto during the summer of 2019, saying it felt as though lightning had struck, became a 33-year-old Olympic champion talking about building something meaningful for the next generation. The 17-year-old girl who simply said, "I'm glad I asked him," became a 24-year-old woman who firmly declared she would never skate with another partner. Both of them changed, yet the bond between them never did. If anything, it grew stronger with every passing season. It became something deeper, something impossible to define but impossible to deny. That is the real story of Ryuichi. It isn't a story about jumps, lifts, or technical scores. It isn't even about Olympic strategy. It's the story of one man who kept getting back on his feet after nights when he wanted to quit, and one woman who discovered something more valuable than her own career. Where those two journeys crossed, one of the most remarkable partnerships in Japanese figure skating was born. No one has ever fully told the story of those 7 years. Everything began during the summer of 2019 at a rink outside Toronto. A 26-year-old man and a 17-year-old girl stood on the ice together for the very first time. They knew each other's names. They respected each other's skating ability. Beyond that, they knew almost nothing about one another. No one can accurately describe what they both felt that day. Years later, Ryuichi Kihara said it felt like lightning had struck him. Riku Miura simply said she was glad she had reached out. Different words, the same meaning. That was the moment everything started. 7 years later, in February 2026, they stood together at the top of the podium at the Milano Cortina Winter Olympics. Olympic gold, a world record, a moment that left skating fans across Japan in tears. But millions of viewers never saw what happened behind that victory. Those 7 years were never the fairy tale many people imagined. They were quieter, harder, more painful, and far more human. To understand that journey, you first have to look at where Ryuichi Kihara was before 2019. At the time, his competitive career seemed to be approaching its end. After separating from his previous partner, he was recovering from a back injury while living alone in a small apartment in Toronto. To cover his living expenses, he worked part-time jobs. A professional figure skater was trying to survive in a foreign country by working side jobs. He lived every day caught between chasing his dream and accepting reality. If someone had told him then that he would become an Olympic gold medalist 5 years later, he almost certainly would have laughed. Nothing about his situation made that future seem possible. Then a 17-year-old skater named Riku Miura entered his life. She asked him to become her pair's partner. Kahara never hesitated. Years later, he admitted that without Riku, he probably would have retired long before reaching the Olympics. That single meeting completely changed the direction of his life. At the time, however, no one realized its importance. They were simply two strangers standing on cold ice, trying to learn how to trust one another. Their first years together in Canada were anything but glamorous. Since Miura was still underage, she stayed with a Canadian host family. Every morning, Kahara picked her up, drove her to practice, and took her home afterward. Every single day, year after year, Miura couldn't drive, so Kahara drove, even on mornings when his back hurt so badly that sitting behind the wheel was painful. Even on days when he needed pain medication before practice had even started, he still showed up, not because anyone expected him to, because he believed it was simply what needed to be done. There was also a Japanese massage therapy clinic near their training rink in Toronto. Kahara became a regular visitor. Miura rarely went inside. While she sat in the waiting room happily playing Mario Kart on her Nintendo Switch, Kahara was in the treatment room working to keep his body healthy enough to continue competing. At that stage of her career, Miura didn't yet understand how important long-term body maintenance would become. Kahara had understood it for years. That difference quietly revealed the roles they would naturally develop over the next 7 seasons. Kahara prepared. Miura performed. Kahara managed every detail. Miura trusted her instincts. No coach assigned those responsibilities. They emerged naturally because of who they were. Coach Bruno Marcotte once described them with a simple comparison. He joked that Kahara was Luigi, while Miura was Mario. Not because one was more important than the other, because their personalities were complete opposites. Kahara was careful, methodical, and always thinking about someone else before himself. Miura was energetic, instinctive, and preferred action over overthinking. Ironically, those differences became their greatest advantage. Kahara's logical mindset gave Miura stability. Miura's emotion and spontaneity reminded Kahara why the journey mattered. Neither one could have reached the top without the other. Kahara, born in 1992, was 33 years old in 2026. That number deserves a moment of thought. In singles skating, 30 already makes an athlete a veteran. In pairs skating, male skaters continue lifting their partners until their bodies simply can't anymore. There is no official retirement age, but the human body eventually decides for you. After lifting Miura thousands of times over 7 years, Kahara's back carried the cost of every performance. There were mornings when he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, asking himself why he kept doing this. There were periods when the pain became so severe that he wondered if he could survive another month. Yet every single time, one image brought him back. Riku Miura waiting for him on the opposite side of the rink. It wasn't pressure, it was purpose. Because she was waiting, he stood up again, and that simple reason carried him forward for 7 unforgettable years. Then came February 16, 2026. A mistake on their lift during the Olympic short program dropped them to 5th place. That night, Kahara cried. He washed his face, but the tears wouldn't stop. The following morning, he was still crying while eating breakfast. He later joked that he cried so much his skin actually looked smoother afterward. For the first time in years, the man who had always been the one holding everything together had completely fallen apart. What finally broke that night was not Ryuichi Kihara's body, it was his composure. For 7 years, he had always been the calm one, the planner, the person who kept everything together. But after the short program in Milan, that strength finally gave way. The massage balls he always carried couldn't ease what he was feeling. The skincare products he had packed out of habit no longer mattered. None of the routines that normally helped him recover could repair what had happened because this time, the injury wasn't physical. His heart was the part that had been shaken. Riku Miura didn't cry. Instead, she quietly wrote a short message on a small note, slipped it into a Ziploc bag together with the warming patches they always used, and handed it to Kahara. "We can absolutely do this. We've done it before." He read the note and tears came again, but these tears were different. The first tears came from disappointment. These tears came from hope. It wasn't the feeling of something falling apart. It was the feeling of something beginning to heal. The next day, Kahara stepped onto the ice with a completely different mindset. Together, he and Miura delivered a breathtaking free skate, earning a world record score of 158.13 points and capturing the Olympic gold medal. That single performance revealed everything about the partnership they had built over 7 years. Most people believed Kahara was always the one supporting Miura, but when he finally reached his breaking point, Miura became the one holding him up. That small handwritten note was her version of support. Just as Kahara used massage balls to loosen tight muscles, Miura used a few carefully chosen words to ease the weight on his heart. Whenever one partner became overwhelmed, the other naturally stepped in. That role reversal wasn't something they discussed beforehand. It happened naturally because after 7 years together, they understood each other's condition without needing an explanation. From the outside, it often looked like Kahara was constantly protecting Miura. The truth was far more balanced. On the nights when Kahara struggled, Miura became his strength. On the mornings when Miura needed help, Kahara quietly took care of everything. Neither person permanently belonged to the role of protector. They simply became whatever the other needed at that moment. That was the real foundation of their partnership. During the Olympic press conference, Miura made a statement that deeply moved many fans. "When Kahara retires, that will be the day I retire too. I will never continue skating with someone else." It was a beautiful statement. It sounded completely genuine. But beneath those words was another reality that many people overlooked. A 24-year-old athlete was placing the future of her entire competitive career in the hands of a 33-year-old partner whose body had already absorbed years of punishment. That isn't criticism. It's simply reality. And it raises a difficult question that no reporter directly asked. If Kahara decided tomorrow that his body could no longer continue, what would happen to Miura's future? Miura clearly understood that possibility, yet she still chose to say those words. That's exactly why they carried so much weight. They weren't spoken casually. They were spoken with full awareness of everything that could happen. At their retirement press conference, both skaters were asked the same question. If you could describe your competitive career in one word, what would it be? Kahara answered immediately. Effort. Miura gave the exact same answer. Effort. Neither of them hesitated. Neither searched for a more dramatic word. That shared answer wasn't a coincidence. It reflected 7 years of living through the exact same journey. They didn't choose effort because it sounded humble. They chose it because it was the most accurate description of everything they had experienced. The Olympic gold medal, the Grand Prix final, the World Championship titles, every achievement was built one day at a time through relentless work. The lightning-like first meeting. The handwritten note inside a Ziploc bag, the long wait outside the team bus. Every one of those moments was another expression of the same word, effort. When both partners answered with that single word, it felt as though 7 years of separate experiences became one shared story. After the Olympics, Kahara didn't spend much time talking about winning another medal. Instead, he spoke about something much further into the future. Someday, I'd like to coach together with Riku. 10 or 20 years from now, I want us to build the kind of environment we never had ourselves. Those aren't the words of someone focused only on the next competition. They're the words of someone already thinking about the next generation. Someone who understands that time as an athlete doesn't last forever. For years, they searched in Canada for opportunities that simply didn't exist in Japan. There weren't enough experienced pair skating coaches. There wasn't an established training system. So they left home, from a small apartment in Toronto, a nagging car, countless games of Mario Kart, and years of quiet sacrifice. They built themselves into Olympic champions. Now they want to return home and create a better path for the athletes who come after them. They don't want future Japanese pair skaters to struggle through the same obstacles they faced. They want the next generation to begin with opportunities they never had. Their dream was never only about winning. It was about changing the system that forced them to leave in the first place. That mission is much bigger than personal success. During another press conference, Kahara was asked about his relationship with Miura. He smiled, not an embarrassed smile. It was the smile of someone who already knew exactly how he wanted to answer. I'll leave that to your imagination. Miura simply smiled beside him without adding anything. It may have been the most honest answer either of them could have given. Because there really isn't a single word that fully explains what they are to each other. They spent 7 years living together in a foreign country, training together every day, trusting each other with their lives every time they stepped onto the ice, helping one another through nights of despair and mornings when getting out of bed felt impossible. No simple label can fully describe a bond created through experiences like those. Kahara himself used 2 words during the press conference: comrade. Family put those 2 words together, and they say far more than the word romantic partner ever could. A comrade is someone who fights beside you. Family is someone who remains by your side even when no choice is required. Kahara and Miura chose to become partners. They chose to keep fighting together. Then one day, without realizing it, they had become people who simply belonged in each other's lives. That transformation took 7 years. And perhaps that transformation, not the jumps, not the lifts, not even the scores, was the true reason they stood on top of the Olympic podium in Milan. The 26-year-old man who once described their first meeting as being struck by lightning became a 33-year-old who now dreams about building something for the future. The 17-year-old girl who said she was glad she reached out became a woman determined never to skate with anyone else. Both of them changed. But the bond between them never weakened. It only grew stronger. It became deeper, more meaningful, and impossible to define with words. Every massage ball inside Kahara's bag represented years spent keeping his body ready to lift Miura. Every massage gun had been used on muscles that had launched her into the air thousands of times. Every bottle of skincare reflected years of standing beside her through Canada's cold, dry winters. The legs that waited nearly an hour outside a team bus were the same legs that had chosen, day after day, to remain by her side. All of those ordinary moments came together to create the 2 Olympic champions standing at the top of the podium in Milan. That is the real story of Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara. It isn't a story about technique. It isn't a story about strategy. It's the story of one man who kept finding reasons to stand back up when he felt broken. And one woman who discovered something more valuable than her own career. Where those 2 stories crossed, one of the most remarkable partnerships in Japanese figure skating history was born, one that very few people truly saw from the inside.